guess if you can justify it, maybe you can prove God. If God's real, I guess my question to you would be is why does he allow so many bad things and tragedies to happen?
Right. So have you ever looked at responses to the problem of evil?
Like, evil meaning like...
The objection that you're giving is the problem of evil objection. So I'm just wondering, because it's kind of been...
Basically, because I'm saying that I'm thinking in the concept or the abstraction that there is evil. I'm conceding that there's good, and that that must come from like the divine, like God.
Well, I'm just asking if you've ever looked at any of the responses. I mean, there's a lot of different ways people approach the problem of evil objection. But one objection that I tend to use is just simply that if God doesn't exist, then we're going to need a basis for the standard by which we judge good and evil. So there are correct implications for when we deny the real metaphysical existence of the good. One of those implications would be that we no longer have a standard by which to judge either good or evil.
And that standard came from God.
In the Christian worldview, yeah.
Well, then I guess my next question, outside of the Christian world...
No, worldview.
That worldview.
Yeah.
I mean, I apologize. My first time on the show, so I'm a bit jittery.
It's okay.
So outside of that view, my question is this, is that then if that's not the case, then there can be no good and evil, and then one act doesn't mean anything. So then how do we define anything? Then I'm just like a little bit confused. How does anyone make sense from right and wrong then?
No, it's not saying that there is no. It's a hypothetical. You understand what that is, right?
Yes.
Right. Gotcha. So it's just saying that the comparison is between two paradigms. One paradigm has an account for good and evil as metaphysical things, or in the case of evil, not a thing, but a privation or a move of the will against the good. The other worldview, which would be like the atheist materialist paradigm, typically doesn't have any account for and is really premised on denying metaphysics. So the problem is that when you deny metaphysics as a whole, and that would be things like good, bad, the will, meaning, even ethics ultimately would be part of metaphysics because we're talking about value judgments. Then there's not a basis to make an argument or even a sentence at all. So before I will hear out the argument, but the transcendental argument is an argument prior to predication, prior to making claims at all. So you're going to have to give an account for how you have values at all. Because to say that the Christian worldview is a violation of the paradigm of good and evil, right? Or that it's a violation of some ethical norm that God violates by permitting free creatures to commit evil actions, we need a basis for the standard by which you're saying it's evil, or what is evil. What's good and evil if there's not a God, basically.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of gets gray, because, one thing I was just thinking of, and then I'll mute, is that basically when, like, for example, and this is kind of like a side thought, but a lot of times I notice or I observe, like, a lot of atheists, for example, they say, oh, I don't believe in God or this, or whatever the reasoning is. A lot of times I notice they have, like, a lot of, like, hard trauma or something that's, like, not right in their mind, and then it's like they hate something, and I don't even know if they know what they hate.
Right.
But then they just, that internal, like, war,
mm-hmm.
It spews out. Like, a lot of times I see it, like, maybe, like, kids, or, like, say, kids, or even young adults, like teens, out on their parents, because maybe their parent was, they hold those beliefs. And it's like, oh, well, it's like this whole confusing like thing. It's almost like they're at war with God, and then now they're at war with everyone who doesn't think just like them.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times that's the personal psychological motivation for atheism. Of course, they'll say, well, that doesn't really disprove my position. And that's true. There's no psychological report that proves or disproves any position. So positions stand on their own objectively, whether they're true or false, based on the actual argumentation. But yeah, I think you're right about that being a common psychological trait. But what we're getting at here is just basically that in order to make the argument about the problem of evil, to argue at all requires giving an account for something more fundamental. And that's what the transcendental argument is doing, is that it's saying that the things that you're using to argue or make sentences at all can only work in a worldview or a paradigm where God exists, there's metaphysics, there's an external world, there's objective standards, there's universals, there's laws of logic. All those things have to be the case for you to even make a sentence. So that's what I'm saying, is that the problem of evil argument doesn't work because it's not addressing the transcendental argument, and how the transcendental argument points out that if there is no God or good, then there is no basis for good or evil.